Hi guys, welcome back to the GCSE revision series. Today I'm going to be showing you how to get a grade 9 in GCSE English Literature. Now this is the most requested video I've got on this channel and also the one that I really wish I had before I did my exams, because English Literature was the subject that I struggled with the most, but I ended up getting 156 out of 160 in my final exams, and today I'm going to be showing you how exactly I did that. So I'm going to be showing you everything that I did to achieve those grades, but more importantly I'm going to point out the most effective things that I did that made the best use of my time, because no one wants to waste time, especially at this point this close to your exams. So let's get started. Before I start, I want to preface this by saying that no matter what resources you have available, no matter how good your teacher is, or if you're in difficult circumstances with your school not being very supportive, I think that anyone given enough dedication can actually get the grade 9 or get whatever grade you're aiming for, because the turning point for me was when I started putting in enough time myself at home in terms of both my writing ability and my confidence. So I think that, yeah, if you put in enough time, follow the tips I outlined in this video, you can get there, and there's still enough time to do that. So firstly, I'm going to do a brief overview of the papers and their format, because that's super important to know before the exam. This is for AQA, however, it's very similar for other exam boards. Paper 1 is split into two sections, with section A being Shakespeare. You get given an extract from a play, and you need to write in detail about the extract and also about the play as a whole. So you need to know quotes from across the entire play and the plot. And I studied Macbeth for this. Section B is the 19th century novel, which I did Jekyll and Hyde for. Again, very similar, you get given an extract, you have to write in detail about the extract and also about the play as a whole, and you need to answer a question based on a specific theme or character. Paper 2 is the bigger paper, at least for AQA it's 60% of the GCSE, and this involves three sections. Section A is your modern text, so this is a novel or a novella, and you get a choice of two questions, you get to answer one of them, and for this I did Lord of the Flies. Section B is the poetry anthology question. As you know, you're given 15 poems to learn quotes from. In the exam they give you one and you have to compare it to another one that you've sort of learnt quotes from, but you get given one in the exam. And finally, section C of paper 2 is the unseen poetry. You get given two poems that you've never seen before, and you have to do one 24-mark question analysing one of them, and then an 8-mark question comparing both of them. So how do you write a grade 9 level answer for any of these questions from either paper, any of the sections? Well, broadly it's split into two steps, and those are learning and practice. So let's start off with learning. The first thing you should do when you start revising is making sure that you're rock solid on the story and the plot of your novels and plays, and even the message of each of the poems in your anthology. I would definitely recommend rereading the novels if you have time, or even just sections of them, the key events maybe, and definitely reread the poems over and over so that you understand the message. To get a good overall grasp of the plot for your novel and play, I would suggest making summaries at the end of every chapter or scene, because it helps you understand how the plot progresses over time, and that can be really useful when you're writing an answer and you want to give quotes or references to the text in chronological order. There are some great websites for this as well, including SparkNotes and CliffsNotes. Those are the ones that I use the most for my GCSEs, and I'll link those down below. They have great scene summaries, character analysis, and overall summaries of the entire play or novel that you're doing. Once you're happy with the story of the novel or play, then it's super important that you start learning quotes. Now this is probably the longest part of the process, but it is super important because the examiners are looking for that judicious reference to the text, and using quotes is the best way of doing that. You don't always have to do that though, you can sometimes refer to a part of the play, but ideally you should be talking about quotes, analysing language of quotes. It's super important to know quotes categorised by theme and by character. So for example, for Macbeth you might want to know quotes for Lady Macbeth, for ambition, for the theme of the supernatural. And because they can simply ask a question on that, you need to have quotes ready to give for your different points, your different paragraphs. So that's super important. You should also know roughly where each quote is from in the story. People told me when I was revising for my exams that I should know the exact scene and act and everything. It's not that important. There were some that I just had learned, I've learned that this was this scene, this act, but it's not, you don't get marks for it. You get marks for referring to the play, and if you do it in a way that makes sense, and you can even just refer to the context around that event, like after this happens or before this happens, then it's it shows that you understand the text as a whole. You don't need to be saying on this scene, this act, this line. It's just not, it's a waste of time to memorize all of those things. So I chose to use Anki for learning my quotes, which is a digital flashcard learning system that you might have heard of before. If you haven't, then I would recommend you check out my video on that. I'll link it above and in the description. But essentially I use that to learn the quotes and also the grade 9 level analysis to go alongside it. And that was super useful. If you want to get my full set of digital flashcards on Anki for English literature, for Jekyll and Hyde, the poems, Lord of the Flies and Macbeth, then you can check out the link in the description, or I'll put it on screen now. But even if you don't, it's super important to have some sort of system of learning quotes and the analysis to go alongside them. And when you are learning the analysis for quotes, it's super important to know 3 key things for the analysis points for these quotes. The first one is analysing the language techniques used. So most people know similes, metaphors, onomatopoeia, even symbolism, but you want to try and throw in a couple of really impressive language techniques, and I'll have full videos linked down below for really impressive language techniques that you can use in your exams. So for example, some that I learned were synesthesia, in media res, semantic fields, classical illusion, synecdoche and tachypsychia, like absolutely crazy words. There are so many more, and you can just learn all of these phrases, like you learn 1 or 2 of those impressive words for some quotes and you throw that in and it's just super impressive for the examiner. Another super impressive thing that I wish I did more was giving multiple interpretations for the same quote. It's really impressive for the examiner if you give 1 analysis point for a quote and then straight after give an alternative perspective on it, because it shows that you're really thinking critically, thinking outside the box and trying to, you know, think about the writer's intentions for that kind of part of the text. The next key part of your analysis is learning form and structure. Now this is definitely more important for the poems than for the novels and plays, but you should be learning terminology such as caesura, anaphora, enjambment, cyclical structure, because that is almost just as important as your language analysis. And what I did is, obviously you get given your poetry anthology and you annotate it with language techniques, but you should also be annotating structural techniques. So for example, if there is cyclical structure that the writer links back to the start of the poem at the end, then point that out, because you can, you know, use that as part of your analysis and talk about the effect of that on the reader. The last thing to include as part of your analysis is contextual detail, and this is super important if you want to get the absolute top marks. I think this is what helped me get some really high marks in my essays, because I just knew the context about each poem, about the play, about the writer. You need to know a little bit about the writer's life even, and if you link that to the techniques that they use, and then in conjunction talk about the effect of those things on the reader and the message that they're trying to convey. Maybe it's a political message, maybe it's any message about society, then that is super effective and it's just what the examiners want to see. So that wraps up the learning stage. Now I want to talk about practice, and this is just as important as the learning stage for English literature. So the first thing you want to do is make lots of essay plans. I'll put some screenshots or screen recordings of the plans that I made, but I made a ton for the novels, the plays, the poems, because the annoying thing about English literature is that there are so many possible questions that could come up, and for any given question you need to be prepared to basically just plan very quickly and just start writing, having quotes, having points that make sense. So the best way to brute force your way through this is to make lots of essay plans, and even if the exact question doesn't come up, you'll have made so many plans that you'll have something similar in your mind and you'll have a general idea and you can kind of make it up on the spot mostly. So there are a bunch of places you can look to find some essay questions to plan. The first place being obviously past papers. That gives you an indication of what the exam board typically tends to ask, what kinds of wording they use in the question. Next, you want to use websites and YouTube videos. As I'll talk about later, there's some great channels I recommend for that. Talk to your teachers. They might have some great ideas for what kinds of questions could come up for a certain theme or character. You could talk to your friends, maybe make a list of possible questions and making a joint plan together on a document or something like that. And finally, you can just think of your own. If you have a list of all the characters, all the themes, then for the top, like the main themes and characters, you can just try and make a plan for each of them. And yeah, you basically have covered all of your bases, which is pretty low risk strategy. So I am refilming this part, but bear with me. So the next thing is to do practice timed essays. And you can start off by doing these non-timed because you can get a feel for how to answer the questions with as much quality as possible, trying to perfect your answers, and then moving to doing some timed stuff because, you know, time pressure is super important in English literature specifically. It's a really time pressured exam, both of them. So I would suggest giving these into your teacher and getting them marked because you get really valuable feedback. It's not like maths where you can, you know, sort of learn from the mark scheme, or sciences. It's more like it's a, you know, subjective kind of marking, and you need to sort of have an expert to show you what you're missing. So try to aim to do these about once a week, once a fortnight, depending on how close you are to your exams. And yeah, get as much feedback as possible, improve, and then do more papers and give them in, and focus on doing the papers and the questions that you are least confident on so you can improve on those. This is one of the most time efficient tasks that you can do. Doing an hour of practice papers is so much more effective than doing an hour of rereading notes or highlighting or something that's less effective. To find the past papers, you should be looking at your specification website or any other website that has question banks. You can also ask your teacher again for some questions. And yeah, it's a similar process to doing the essay plans, but this time you want to be doing the whole question or the whole paper. So yeah, I'm going to emphasize this point because this is what gave me the confidence that I needed leading up to my exams. Before this, I was pretty terrified of English as a whole, but doing practice and getting the feedback that I was actually improving, it gives you a lot of motivation to keep on going. The third part of the practice stage is reading grade 9 model answers. This is super important for a subject like English because it's not always clear what you're trying to aim for as opposed to other subjects. So you want to have some frame of references for what kind of writing, what kind of analysis get the highest grades. So yeah, it can be useful to get a feel for what a grade 9 essay looks like. Some of the features that indicate a high level response include a clear and coherent structure. For example, you might be doing 3 paragraphs, each with a clear topic sentence and 2 to 3 quotes in which you go in depth into the analysis for each. And each paragraph should focus on a specific aspect of the text. The next point is the integration of context throughout your answer. Referring to the political, historical, and social context that is relevant to the text throughout your answer, not just throwing it all at the end, but weaving it throughout, is really impressive. And I think that's what can really get you the top marks. And it really helped me get the mark that I did in the answer that I attached in the description. So demonstrate an awareness of the author's background and the impact that had on their work. Next is quotation selection. You want to select a number of short but relevant quotes because this is seen as judicious on the mark scheme. So you don't want super long quotes, it won't impress the examiner anymore. If anything, having shorter quotes is better because it shows that you're being, again, judicious sort of means you're judging which part of the quote is the most important, and then you want to be trimming down and then zooming in on specific words. And again, that shows really high level analysis. Anyway, back to Old Me. Next, you need to be aware of literary techniques. Like I mentioned before, you should know about symbolism, imagery, those sorts of things, language devices as well, form and structure. But the key thing here is not just knowing the literary technique, but also the effect of it and the message. Again, if you want to see my fully annotated 34 out of 34 answer to a paper 2 question, then I'll leave the link down below to that document. It's a super useful resource, so I would definitely recommend that you check it out after this video. So those are the 3 practice strategies, and you want to be trying to incorporate all 3 in parallel. So making essay plans, doing essays, and looking at model answers, all in sort of a cycle, doing essays, getting feedback, and improving your essays again and again. When you're analysing, do think outside the box, be creative, don't just point out the obvious, what is happening in the quote. You're not trying to describe, you're trying to make some inferences about what the writer might be trying to say. Even if you feel like you might be stretching the meaning at times, that is much better than not going into enough depth and not sort of giving your opinion on what you think the quote might mean. And yeah, it shows to the examiner that you've at least made an effort to think critically. Whatever you say, it's important to package it in a way that sounds nice. And yeah, to get that kind of skill, you want to read model answers. Now, this is a separate point, but I think that to improve your writing skills in English literature, it can be super useful for someone to walk through high-level analysis with you via sort of videos and online resources, so that you kind of have a frame of reference for what good writing really sounds like. And for that, I would recommend a couple of channels. The first being Mr. Everything English. absolutely carried me through the couple of months leading up to the exams. Also Mr. Salas, again, absolute legend. If you haven't watched them already, they have great analysis videos teaching you how to write a perfect grade 9 essay. And there's other YouTubers out there like Mr. Bruff as well, amazing videos. But yeah, use the resources that you have at your disposal. There are so many online resources like Spark Notes I mentioned before. And of course you have your own notes. If not, then make do with what you have. So just to wrap up, I have a couple of closing points. And the first one is about identity. You want to try and avoid the self-limiting belief that you are not a good writer inherently, because there's no such thing as being a bad writer. Anyone can improve given enough time and effort, and if you start believing that you are not good at English, then you won't be good at English. You sort of need to let go of that identity and feel like, there's always scope for improvement. I was so sure that I would be getting a 7, which is by no means a bad grade, but I just accepted that I would be getting a 7, and on results day, again, I was expecting a 7, but I was surprised with 98% in my literature mark. So whatever you are predicted doesn't define you. Just put in the work and you never know what might happen on results day. The next thing is to just get started. Ignore how much time you might have procrastinated or wasted away, because that's how I felt as well, but there's still enough time. Get started, get moving, because then you have the momentum to keep on moving. It's never too late to get started with revision. And finally, practice regularly. Whether it's quotes, learning the story of your poems, the meanings, form and structure, whatever it is, do it regularly, because there's quite a lot to get through, and the only way that you learn it and retain it in your memory is by doing it regularly, using something like flashcards, digital, physical, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is, do it regularly. And that's just about everything for today's video. If you have any questions, leave it down below in the comment section and I'll try to reply as quickly as possible. But yeah, apart from that, best of luck for your exams. Check out the resources that I've linked below in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.